Now, I'm going to talk about the managing years. They were roughly from 1981 right up to 1996. And the first thing, this is the big picture looking straight down Yonge towards the downtown and the lake. Many of you are familiar with it. It's a key point in your career if you decide, as I call it, to cross the floor from being a planner to a manager. It ain't the same. A lot of people think it is. It's just you can make more money. Well, yeah, but not really. You got a lot more headaches, that's for sure. But I learned that management is a totally different job. It's getting things done through others, not you. It's getting things done through others. And you have to do that. You have to motivate. You have to have teams. You have to have different approaches and all these things that many of you are very familiar with. So what did I do in my role as manager? I was, first of all, what was called a program manager for the West Central section of the old city of Toronto. I had 6 staff, tons of hot issues, these development of these secondary plans, neighborhood infill, the severance kind of issue, industrial job retention, business improvement areas, hospital expansion. Doctors Hospital on College Street was a big deal. Group homes. Some of you, I'm sure, remember those debates where we first advocated in Toronto group homes as of right in every residential neighborhood. No zoning, no committee of adjustment, as of right. And that was a huge fight, but that was done. And there are group homes in Rosedale and in Forest Hill as well as everywhere else in the city now. Deinstitutionalization of the big Center for Addiction and Mental Health building on Queen Street. Obviously, little did I know that later in my life this would be very personal with my son and all his mental health problems. Bachelorettes, which was the whole business of after deinstitutionalization, Parkdale became the receiving neighborhood for these gorgeous old big houses to be broken down into multiple rooming houses. Tons of problems associated with that. Obviously, traffic never goes away for a planner. And an OMB victory over the Rosedale subway station, of all places. And I actually put the planning case forward that normally you would want to intensify over a subway station, but not there, because the Rosedale station, if any of you know it, is right in the middle of a park ravine system that sort of separates the downtown core from the neighborhoods. And we won that. I then got promoted to be director of community and neighborhoods for the whole city in '86. Had a staff of 45, 4 area managers. Again, different job, different responsibilities. So I learned to connect this big picture you see here with local daily life and how every person is different. You need to bring out the potential of all your staff with different strategies to work on big problems. So I formed work groups. I call one the City Life Work Group and got a bunch of people together and said, I could see that, you know, where the sort of future was headed, that more people would want to live downtown and tired of commuting, and what's city life all about, and what are the kinds of things as a planner you wanted to make sure were present to sustain good city life. And the team came up with a great set of ideas, and it was really positive. Now, some of the things that, this is an example of teams with the land use and the official plan exercise. You are all familiar with that. Some of the things that didn't go so well. This is a site that's now known basically as the Distillery District or the West Don Lands. It was called the Tarateri at the time, and it was a huge swath of sort of old, mainly empty industrial rail yards, former slaughterhouses, that kind of stuff. And it was all expropriated and acquired, and it was supposed to be redeveloped for a new mixed-use community like St. Lawrence. Well, the reality is, didn't happen. The property got acquired and expropriated, but one new thing that I learned back then was, of course, the soil contamination, which nobody really had a lot of experience way back then into that. So to make a long story short, nothing happened for a long time because you had to clean the soil, you had to cart some away, you had to go through a whole environmental process that was new, certainly to me and to a lot of people at that time. Another example, I've shown this I think yesterday, is you always read and you always learn, as people said this morning. This book is kind of interesting, The Upside It Down. You will absolutely, if you haven't already, have lots of downs in your planning career. And you'll have lots of ups, but you got to learn when you're down. And how do you get back up, as Eleanor was saying here this morning? What are the ingredients for you as a planner and for your council, for your communities, your city, et cetera, to overcome obvious obstacles. So it's a good read and probably worth taking a close look at. Other things that I found useful is this. You talked about networks this morning. Well, one of the things we formed in the old city of Toronto was what we called the Healthy City Network. And it was think of it as the proactive, in some cases, shit disturbers in each department, who were really committed to moving an agenda forward. And I was one of those. And this group I was the chair of the Healthy City Work Group, and we did a lot of work on this one. This was way back in the 80s, looking to what Toronto would be like in the year 2000, and what was our vision for it. So to help that along, we did this. Toronto's first ever State of the City report, which I think, 1993. And it was really powerful. We unveiled this at the top of the CN Tower for obvious visual reasons. And the chair of this initiative was Jack Layton, former councillor who I worked with for a long time, and his wife Olivia, of course. It was very powerful, and it had a lot of legs because it, as you can see, was deliberately cartoonish and tried to keep it very simple and to inspire the population and the politicians and engage them in this. And that tradition has now continued, and it's going to come out next week by the Toronto Community Foundation called Vital Signs, the Vital Signs Report for 2014. It'll be online, you can see it. I don't know if Calgary and Edmonton have it. I imagine you probably do, but if not, it's a good tool because it takes stock of what's the state of the city at this given period of time in every calendar year. What are you doing well? What are you not doing well? Where's the opportunities to change? Those kinds of things. It's a very valuable tool, so I'd encourage you to embrace that sort of concept. One of the other great things I had a chance to do was, in those early days, is travel. Of course, the city was very proactive. We were twinned with Amsterdam. They sent me and a whole bunch of people over to Amsterdam and London and Paris and all these great places to learn, which I did enormously, and what they were doing, because often the European planning traditions, were ahead of us. So there's a lot to translate. This one, about make no little plans, I use this because of the whole business, again, of Lifecycle. There's a group in Toronto called 8 to 80 Cities. And it's the whole business of you plan and design cities that are valid and good and healthy for everyone from 8 to 80, and obviously that whole life cycle span. And this I never forgot. This is important. Everybody belongs in a city, not just us healthy, able-bodied people. And you have to plan for that in your city. So what did I do after that? Well, you might wonder where the hell that is. That's not Toronto. After a 20-year mark in my career, I took advantage of an amazing program we had then, which was called Earned Deferred Leave. And I took a pay cut of 25% voluntarily for 3 years ahead of this. And then I took off for 9 months while I still got my paycheck. And it was the best thing I ever did to renew me in my life cycle. And I always had a boat. So my wife and I took our boat, it was a trawler, from Toronto Island down to Key West, Florida, and all the way back, up and down the Intercoastal Waterway. And it was a busman's holiday. I stopped in to see the planning directors along the way, walked the cities, talked, sucked up all the local knowledge. This is the Key West Planning Department, believe it or not, 3 people. But the reality is I learned a phenomenal amount. And when I came back, I was just full of energy and creativity and innovation. So a number of things we did. This, some of you I'm sure have walked it, it's called Birksea Park. This used to be an asphalt municipal parking lot behind the Flatiron building on Front Street. And it was converted by the city to rip up the asphalt. Who cares about parking 50 or 100 cars? This is more important because you already own the land. And that's what it looks like today. And it was a great example of urban acupuncture, which I'm sure you've heard about, because you hit those spots that for a small amount of money you can make a big difference, and it has waves of a positive reaction all around it. This was one of them. Another example was something that I talked about yesterday. I'll just be very brief on this, was the King Parliament, King Spadina strategy, where I adopted a very deliberate, radical approach and worked with Jane Jacobs on this and Mayor Barbara Hall. And Jane always told me, and this is an important lesson, she said, if you're going to do something, it's worth doing it well. Don't do something half-assed, because it's a waste of everybody's time. And boy, so true. So I decided no half-assed approaches here, I'm going all out. So I abolished all land use, no density numbers in the official plan or zoning. Required performance standards, had height limits, setbacks, no parking in front, urban strategies, and allowed mixed use for the first time ever. These areas were only zoned industrial. It's been wildly successful, but the lesson I learned out of that, as I said in more detail yesterday, is my staff, about 98% of them, opposed me as the director. They thought I was crazy because we've never done it like this. And I said, yeah, but your strategy of more of the same results in these gorgeous old buildings getting demolished and then more parking lots created. Like, how dumb is that, right? So it was a real lesson because they were possessed by this. And they fought me all the way. But at some point in time, you know that you just have to stick with what you believe in is right, and I did. And this got approved by council and the OMB and has resulted in massive, huge in private sector investment of residential, of employment, of retail, of everything, and public initiatives on the streetscape. And it was simply the result of a policy change on paper. That's the real lesson that hit me. It wasn't spending tens of millions of dollars. It was a policy change, having the guts to do it and carry it out. So next time you're in Toronto, walk Spadina. We have these sexy new streetcars now on Spadina. They're very sensual. They're beautiful. You gotta ride them. Anyway, this is how successful. This is David Mervish, theater emporium. Impresario, and of course Frank Gehry, famous architect. Now you may not know, but Frank was born in Toronto. He's a Canadian, and of course went to LA and has lived there ever since, and worldwide fame and fortune. Well, David Mervish commissioned him. You can see the relationship to the CN Tower. This is on King Street near Metro Hall, right near the Royal Alexandra Theatre. Frank's proposal was 3 gigantic mixed-use towers, up to 92 stories in height. The smaller ones are in the 80s. And what happened, and this is part of the result of that King Spadina change that I made, the policies are too successful because it's attracted a lot of this stuff, which you really have to do some studies to say, do you have the infrastructure to support this kind of density? But the end result of this story is a pretty good one because instead of 3 towers, there's going to be 2, and there's Art Gallery of Ontario involved, and a whole preservation of some of the old industrial warehouses. It's a controversial project, but basically it stimulated a lot of this kind of thinking. Here's sort of a more recent, a year or so ago, of what's going on in downtown. And you read all the papers. There is a hell of a lot. There's over 150 cranes in the air in the city right now, more than New York, Mexico City, Chicago, and LA combined. It's unprecedented. And a lot of people have forecast, the bubble's going to burst, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't really think so, because the fact is, people are buying for investment purposes, for sure, like elsewhere, like in Vancouver, but also to live downtown in these buildings. And mainly it's young people. And immigration is a big source of that. It's just like Calgary grows through in-migration, the Toronto area gets about 100,000 people a year, every year, coming in from all over the world and from other parts of Canada. And that demand is being filled. So I think also another lesson of this is in terms of, I don't have a problem with big, tall buildings in the right place. And if you can't put them, on the subway corridor or around the CN Tower, where the hell are you going to put them? So I think the problem is when you get these real tall towers, in the wrong places. And, communities rightly have a lot of issues to deal with about that. Here's one of the key slides I wanted to share with you, that if you don't already know this in your career, this is going to be an operative word. Boy, you got to persevere, just like Eleanor was saying this morning. You know, it's a tough job, and you got to really roll with the punches, and you got to be, you know, tough, and you have to, you know, have those core values I talked about really ingrained in you. And I think my sort of lessons of all this was, you know, be passionate about what you do and where you work. And I'll be very candid with you. If you don't feel good about the place you're working in, then go someplace else, because it'll suck you dry. You want to be creative, you want to do great things, right? And for various reasons, political, bureaucratic, whatever it is, you can't do anything. You get so frustrated and you get turned off by the whole profession and all that kind of stuff. Don't stay there. It'll kill you. Go someplace else. There's always problems to solve elsewhere. And that's a lesson here in the perseverance.